In Paris, a woman entered a hotel with her mother. Hours later, the mother was gone, and every trace of her existence had vanished. The hotel staff denied she had ever been there. Luggage disappeared, documents erased, a living person wiped from reality. The Vanishing Hotel Room. Paris mystery. In the late 19th century, Paris was the jewel of Europe, a city of beauty, culture, and luxury. Travelers from around the world came to see its grand boulevards, the glittering lights, and the promise of adventure. But one story from this time has haunted historians and mystery lovers for over a century. A story so chilling, it feels like something out of a nightmare. They call it the Vanishing Hotel Room. It begins with a young Englishwoman traveling with her mother to Paris for the Exposition Universelle, the Great World's Fair. The two women arrived at a grand hotel and were checked into a room together. Everything seemed normal. But soon after, the mother began to feel unwell. A doctor was called, and after examining her, he recommended a prescription from a local pharmacy. The daughter was asked to go into the city and fetch the medicine. She left her mother resting in the room, but when she returned hours later, the unimaginable had happened. Her mother was gone. Not only was the bed empty, but all traces of her mother's existence had vanished. The luggage was missing, the clothing was gone, even the hotel records showed no entry for the mother's stay. It was as if she had never been there at all. Shocked and terrified, the daughter confronted the hotel staff, but they insisted she had checked in alone. They claimed no one had ever seen her mother. They looked at her as if she were mad, dismissing her pleas as hysteria. The young woman refused to accept this. She scoured the hotel, searching every corridor and locked room, but there was no trace. When she demanded answers, the staff grew colder, more insistent. Her mother did not exist. Overwhelmed with grief and confusion, she finally left the hotel, her story spreading through whispers and rumor. Some believed her. Others dismissed her as insane. But the truth has never been uncovered. Theories about what really happened have swirled for over a century. One explanation is that her mother may have died suddenly of a contagious illness, perhaps the plague, and the hotel covered it up to avoid scandal or panic. In this theory, the staff quickly disposed of the body, burned the belongings, and erased all records to protect the hotel's reputation. Others believe something more sinister was at play, a conspiracy involving murder, kidnapping, or even the French authorities themselves. Some say the mother may have been taken for experiments or to settle some hidden debt or political intrigue. And then there are those who see the story as a ghost tale, an urban legend rooted in the fear of losing someone we love without explanation. A person who exists one moment and is erased from reality the next. To this day, no definitive record of the event has been found, but the legend of the Vanishing Hotel Room has persisted through books, articles, and countless retellings. Each version adds new details, but the heart of the story remains the same. A mother and daughter checked in. Only one checked out. Was it a cover-up, a cruel trick, or a supernatural erasure of existence itself? No matter the answer, the story taps into a universal fear that we could lose someone dear to us, not through death alone, but through complete disappearance, as if they had never lived at all. Story number 2, the toxic lady Gloria Ramirez. On the night of February 19th, 1994, Riverside General Hospital in California became the setting of one of the most disturbing medical mysteries in history. It began with the arrival of a 31-year-old woman named Gloria Ramirez. She was rushed into the emergency room, weak and disoriented, suffering from advanced cervical cancer. But within minutes of her arrival, something happened that would terrify everyone in that room and leave a mystery that still has no clear answer. As doctors and nurses began treating her, they noticed strange details. Her skin glistened with an oily sheen, and a strong, chemical-like odor seemed to come from her body. When they tried to draw blood, a smell filled the air. Sharp, like ammonia. Even stranger, the blood itself appeared unusual, with small crystals floating inside the sample tube. Then chaos erupted. One nurse suddenly collapsed to the floor. Another began to feel dizzy and fainted. A doctor, too, fell to his knees, gasping for air. One by one, the medical staff who had been close to Gloria Ramirez's body became violently ill, suffering from nausea, convulsions, and even temporary paralysis. The emergency room was thrown into panic. Staff members scrambled out of the room, terrified that they were being poisoned by the very patient they were trying to save. Gloria Ramirez, meanwhile, went into cardiac arrest. With only a skeleton crew left to continue treatment, she died just 45 minutes after arriving. But the horror was only beginning. In total, more than 20 people in the hospital became sick after exposure to her body. 5 were hospitalized. One nurse spent weeks in intensive care, her lungs scarred from the fumes. Investigators rushed to find answers. How could a human body emit toxic fumes strong enough to knock out trained professionals? The first theory was mass hysteria, that the staff panicked and their symptoms were psychological. But this didn't explain the crystalline particles in her blood or the serious physical damage some workers suffered. Another theory suggested Gloria had been using a common household solvent called dimethyl sulfoxide as a pain reliever. If this chemical built up in her body and was then exposed to the hospital's oxygen treatments, it could have transformed into a deadly compound. Dimethyl sulfate, a powerful toxin. This might explain the fumes, the strange crystals, and the severe symptoms in the medical staff. But this explanation was never fully proven. Toxicologists debated the science, with many insisting the reaction could not have happened in the way investigators suggested. Others argued that something far stranger must have been at work. Some whispered of secret government experiments, of chemical contamination, or even paranormal causes. The case became known worldwide as the mystery of the Toxic Lady. Gloria Ramirez was laid to rest, but the questions remain. Why did her body turn into a weapon that night? Was it a freak chemical accident, a medical cover-up, or something beyond human understanding? Even today, decades later, her story chills doctors, scientists, and anyone who hears it. A woman who entered the hospital seeking help instead left behind a terrifying puzzle, and the haunting memory of a night when death itself seemed toxic. Story number 3. The ghost ship Mary Celeste. On December 5th, 1872, in the vast emptiness of the Atlantic Ocean, a British ship named Dei Gratia spotted another vessel drifting aimlessly. Its sails were tattered. It leaned slightly to one side, but it was still afloat. As they drew closer, the crew recognized the name painted across the bow: Mary Celeste. The ship had left New York just weeks earlier, carrying a full cargo of industrial alcohol bound for Italy. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 men. All were experienced sailors. The journey should have been routine, but what the rescuers found chilled them to the bone. When they boarded the ship, they discovered it was completely deserted. Not a single person remained on board. The lifeboat was missing, but everything else appeared strangely intact. In the captain's cabin, the crew found the family's belongings neatly arranged, clothing folded, valuables untouched. In the galley, meals seemed to have been prepared and left half-eaten, as if the crew had suddenly vanished mid-bite. The cargo of alcohol was undisturbed. The ship itself was seaworthy, with only minor damage. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no violence. It was as though the Mary Celeste had been abandoned in an instant. The rescuers searched every corner of the ship, but the mystery only deepened. The captain's log contained entries up until 10 days earlier, all routine, nothing unusual. The last recorded position was hundreds of miles away from where the ship was found. So, what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? Theories began to spread like wildfire. Some suggested a sudden waterspout or seaquake had terrified the crew into abandoning ship. Others believed an alcohol explosion, vapors leaking from the cargo hold. may have scared them into fleeing in the lifeboat, only to perish at sea. But there were darker ideas too. Some whispered of mutiny, that the crew had turned against their captain and then met some grim fate. Others claimed pirates had attacked, but nothing was stolen, and no signs of violence were ever found. And then came the supernatural theories, that the Mary Celeste had been cursed, doomed from the start, that sea monsters or otherworldly forces had swallowed the crew whole, leaving only their ghostly ship to drift across the ocean. The ship was eventually brought to port, and an official investigation was launched. But no definitive answers were ever found. The crew of 10, including Captain Briggs and his family, were never seen again. The Mary Celeste lived on, its name etched into legend. It sailed under new captains for years, but it was forever haunted by its reputation as a ghost ship. Even sailors who served on it later reported misfortunes, believing the vessel was cursed. Today, the Mary Celeste remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries of all time. A ship found perfectly intact, yet emptied of human life. A floating riddle adrift in history. Was it a tragic accident, a panicked mistake, or something far more sinister? Something the ocean itself swallowed and refused to give back? No one knows. The sea keeps its secrets, and the fate of the Mary Celeste's crew is one of them.